Till morning, so I can say good morning. Sorry for the late start, but thank you for the kind introduction. What I'm going to share, of course, is a few slides in terms of work we've done, and more importantly, our own views in terms of data analytics, HR analytics, and data-driven decision making. But as Chanchal has promised us, although it's a low crowd because most of the people are there today, we will make it as interactive as possible. So I'm going to ask you questions. I'm not going to make you exercise, but hopefully you will answer some of those questions. A quick introduction. I run a boutique consulting company based in Pune called Apuhan Management Consultants. We do these four things, basically strategy in HR, many industries. And while we are based in Pune, we've done work in about 23 countries and about 23 cities in India and about 18 countries all over the world, where while of course our clients are there, our consulting approach is we go there, complete the work and come back. These are just some of the more recent clients, very diverse range in terms of size, scale, industry kind of thing. So good to start a story. I'll put a timer so that I know what I'm doing. Okay, you're there. Okay, so anybody from the insurance industry or BFSI, banking, financial services? Okay, so for the next few slides, you'll be my co-faculty. Okay, so always good to start with a story, like I said, and I'm going to share you 3 examples of how we've worked with our clients in terms of using data analytics or data-driven decision making from an HR perspective. First and foremost, I'm going to talk about the recruitment part. Now, sir, what's your name? Rohit. So, Rohit, you would know that in BFSI, the attrition rate is very, very important and it's very high. Okay, we were working with a very large insurance company, 6,500–7,000 employees, and the attrition rate was somewhere between 23 and 24%. Is that high? That's high. Yeah. Now let me tell you the second part of what I was going to tell you. 23–24% per month. Okay, which means the feet on street. Again, when I'm saying attrition rate, it is not overall, it is at the FOS level, feet on street level. So they were somewhere between 20 to 25% a month on month, but attrition rate was every month, which means every 5–6 months you had a new organization in the field, roughly like that. And therefore, one of the things that they told us is, can you identify what is the ideal profile that we should hire so that, there is, what should I say, the attrition rate would come to a reasonable level. And that's where we used data-driven decision making from an HR perspective, because this was attrition or retention. And there was a very, very interesting story. So obviously the thought process was, what is the most successful, most typical profile of my employees at a feet on street level, which I hire. How many of you have done competency framework, competency modeling in your organization? And where are you using that? Normally you would start with recruitment, right? So that means then you have these behavioral element interviews and competency-based recruitment kind of thing. So it was something similar to this, that can we identify an ideal profile and then give that message to all the recruiters all over the field, which is essentially first business and HR, that okay, try and sort of fit, try and identify. We have a round hole, so try and identify a round peg, so that hopefully the attrition rate will come down. So that was obviously the first challenge. And therefore, what should be our recruitment strategy? And then what should be the critical success factors so that we get this down? Now, what we did with them, we asked for data for their employees, and we looked into the performance data. Now, the challenge was that most of the organizations do not have a very objective performance data or objective way of evaluating people. But there is a formal, informal, subjective way which also gets into some kind of scoring. So even for their large number of employees, even in the feet of street kind of thing, the appraisal data was, banda acha hai, kaam pe aata hai, chutti nahi marta hai. If you tell him to stay late, he works late. Tell him to work on weekends, he or she works on weekends. So that was the kind of data, unfortunately, that we had. Subjective, but then somewhere they had converted that into some kind of 5-point scale. So yeah, there was some objectivity eventually there. And then we asked the client in terms of give us your data in terms of this appraisal data and in terms of the tenure in terms of the person in the organization. And normally you would look at tenure in terms of years. Given the situation here, we had tenure in terms of weeks in the organization. Because every week they were looking at performance because it is a hardcore sales job. And then we started analyzing and very, very interesting insights started coming in. And some of those insights were in terms of that we seem to be, or the organization seemed to be, a large number of people came from the agricultural background. Agricultural background selling insurance. And this was general insurance. Any reason why this could have happened? Why would people from the agricultural background, which means their earlier generation, parents, father, uncle, etc., were agriculturalists, or to put it very simply, farmers. They didn't want to get into farming, so they wanted to get a corporate job. They obviously were, BA, BCom, BSc kind of thing, basic graduation, and now they were part of this very large multinational insurance company. Any reason, any clue why this could have happened?
Steady income.
Sorry?
Steady income.
Steady income, yeah. So steady income was one.
Second was security.
Job security, yeah, agricultural income kind of thing. I'll come to the real reason why the analysis showed this kind of information. The second insight was prior industry experience is a drawback. If somebody has worked even for few months or few years in some other industry, actually it came out as a drawback. And what did we analyze? We analyzed the profiles of people who are high on performance on one axis and vintage in terms of weeks on the other axis. So the top right quartile. Sports equals performance enhancement. Again, any reason why this could be there? If the person, he or she has been a sports person in her or his school or college days, they were typically in that top right quadrant. Any reason why it could be? Sorry? Winning is a culture. Okay, I'll still come back to that. High performers hail from semi-rural areas. Very, very interesting insights. And business roots are a recipe for success. So let me go to, I'm not going to take you through all this, but let me talk about the first one. The only reason why large number of these high performers and reasonably large vintage were from agricultural background is because when they filled up their CV on their website, there was a drop-down menu and alphabetically agriculture was the first. And therefore people really didn't bother to go down, and by default it took as agriculture. So the real story was very, very different. So when we are looking at data and data-driven decision making, we have to ensure that whatever is getting captured is not garbage in, garbage out. The reason, let me take sports as a performance enhancement, you did mention winning, but more importantly, most of them, and again then we went into more details, these were not individual sports, these were team sports, like a volleyball, cricket, football, which means they are people who are used to working in a team. More importantly, they're also used to having a captain or a coach. And the culture is that I need to listen to my captain and my coach. I might want to dribble and just, what was that movie? That hockey movie? Chak De. I might want to score the goal on my own, but it is a team play. And therefore that again became very, very important. And then of course, based on this, we had to give them specific kind of recommendations in terms of what it could be. There were other kind of recommendations in terms of, the language part of it. There was other kind of recommendation in terms of which community these people came from and which geographical area they were actually servicing, because those things also matter. So very, very interesting kind of, some of it was garbage in, garbage out, like we saw on the agricultural side, but otherwise there were very large number of insights. The second thing is, all of you are HR managers or only L&D and performance management or whatever? HR, definitely yes. So have you heard of this called harmonization and normalization? Yeah, how many of you actually do it? So let's look at the other example of harmonization and normalization of PA performance appraisal data, which again, This was from a pharmaceutical company, again, large number of people in the field, as you can imagine. Now, this was for the sales team. Yeah, this is 5-point scale. This was for operations. What do you see here? What is, this thing won't work here, but what is the difference between these two? Data is skewed on the sales side, yeah? So obviously whoever is evaluating his people or her people, everybody is, I have a A team, everybody is A plus. Yeah, so how can I distinguish between others? So perhaps this person is a lenient person. And this person potentially is a stricter person, and therefore you see, you know, the overall rating to be on the lower side. And therefore, if you do this kind of scatter diagram based on the performance appraisal data that comes to you, as HR, our job is to ensure that we harmonize and normalize. And then this is like an ideal kind of scenario where, you know, this is finance and accounts, large team. You know, they had multiple subsidiaries kind of thing. So they had a nearly 23, 24 people in the finance team. So, you know, this person, whoever is the HOD finance, seemed to have done a reasonable job. I can't see any pattern in terms of, thankfully, a bell curve or whatever, but kind of thing. So it is very important that we identify these patterns and join the dots. And when we try and join the dots and identify the patterns, we obviously have to keep in mind that we are not paranoid and we're not seeing things that don't exist. But clearly, there is a reason to believe that this gentleman seems to be more lenient, and therefore, that 4 can be, you know, and this 2, 2.5 can be an equivalent kind of score. Of course, this is just the appraisal data, what I'm not showing you, but as HR and as HR business partners and HR people who understand business, what we also need to do is look into the business aspects of it first. It shouldn't happen that as a company we are not doing well, but this gentleman has rated everybody as A+. Or the manufacturing has really done a very good job, but this gentleman is saying everybody is average or just about meet expectations. Now in today's times, just about meet expectations is a very, very kind of thing, because people's expectations have changed. I just took a cab and to come here, and unless you know, if you just say, they ask you for a rating, right? So unless you do 3, or if you do 3, which is 3 on 5, which typically meets expectations. So what is it? The driver came, he brought me from wherever to here, and everything was fine. No rash driving, no honking, etc., etc. Meets expectation. That's my basic expectation from the driver. The moment I click, immediately I get a chat or this thing from Ubers, Olas, and Rapidos of the world. Hey, what happened? I said nothing happened. He just met my expectations. So the expectation is that I always give a 5-star rating, which has now become the new norm. And that is something from an HR perspective in corporate cannot work. Everybody can't be 5-star, everybody can't be A+. Even if the company, you know, has overachieved its targets, let's take the sales part, there will always be outliers on the lower side. And therefore, it is our job, using data analytics, to distinguish between the performers and non-performers, which of course is the first primary job of any appraisal kind of system. One more last example from a client is in terms of predicting attrition. And what we did is we first looked in terms of the variable pay system that they had, without getting into whether this variable pay system was right or wrong, because then we are comparing like to like in any case across employees, that how did that change? Yeah, depending on the variable pay kind of system, and some of it is quite what should I say, normal and expected, that people with high variable pay, actual variable pay, in terms of the actual payout, the attrition was very low. There is some kind of minor gap here. And the other thing which we forget as part of performance management is the L&D or training input that we give. And this is from a real estate client, again a very large company. And if you see this, now from anybody from real estate here? Not quite. Okay, in real estate, as you would imagine, this second last function there, legal, is actually very, very critical. Because any real estate project starts with land acquisition. And in today's times and in India, all of us know that how critical and how complex this land acquisition from a legal perspective is there. because what they call the Sat Bara Utara, whatever kind of thing, is hugely, hugely complex. So if this company does not believe that the legal team is critical, and therefore there is hardly any kind of L&D kind of effort then obviously they'll see a large attrition. And in that team to get a large attrition is not good. And therefore one can look at a predictive kind of analytics based on the performance management input. So these are the 2-3 things I thought I'll share these 3 stories from our own example. Okay, so let's look at data-driven decision making here. Without data, all of us have just an opinion. And if everybody has an opinion, then the manager and our boss will say, then let's go by mine. Yeah, that's what normally happens in any organization. And therefore, it is very critical to have correct data. And like we saw from that agriculture example, data, but correct data, sanitized data, data that we can believe in. So why do we need metrics in the first place before we start looking at analysis? Clearly, the primary goal of any data-driven decision making is to obviously get into an informed decision making rather than making guesstimates or going by gut feel. Gut feel, we'll talk about it, is important somewhere, but that gut feel also has to have a backing in terms of what you're going to do with that data. So informed decision making has to be the primary purpose in terms of what you're looking at your data with. And therefore, if you have the kind of right information at the right time to the right people, you will obviously look into the very, very critical informed decision making. All these 3 things are equally important. Right time, right data or right information with the right kind of people. You can't have wrong data with the right people or right data with the wrong people, because they will not know what to do. See, again, I'll give you a sort of a secret that we have as a consulting organization. Whenever we want some information from a company which is not our client, suppose we are doing some kind of market research and we are actually meeting competitors. The standard way to go is, talk to someone and get an appointment and then get a door slammed on your face saying that, why should we give you this data? And then we come out. But you go to some branch office of that same organization, and the same data that you are really desperate for might be under that glass table, it is there. The only thing that you need is how to read upside down. That is the trick. So what data in whose hand is also very, very critical, because things that are so sensitive at HO need not always be sensitive. And as an organization, as HR, if we believe this is sensitive data, but it needs to be shared with our team members in the field, in branch offices, in regional offices, we need to be also sensitize them that this is critical and don't keep that printout on your table or something like that. So that's very critical. And therefore, be it, I'm just taking a very simple example, as simple thing as recruitment, there'll be so many data kind of things that you can look into. It's a question of, we all know this recruitment funnel. Are we tracking the kind of right metrics to do the informed decision making? All of us have variety of sources for recruitment. Yeah, it could be the online sources where we subscribe to large databases, to referral policy, or to some ex-employees coming back, or so on and so forth. But what are we doing with that information and how are we using it? How many of us very, let's say annually, sort of relook in terms of what kind of recruitment has happened from what sources and do some kind of restructuring of their sources? Do we do that? All of us do that? Great. So that is a very simple thing to do that, because there will be newer sources that come to you, and therefore you have to ensure that you look into that. Critical part is not stop at what, but get into so what. I'll have a slide a little later, but I think when we are looking at data for decision making, we have to look at into 3 horizons. First and foremost, what is this? What is this data? The second is therefore what it means, which is the first level of analysis, first level of some kind of working on that. But the more important from an HR perspective is the third horizon, where therefore what should I do with this? What it is, therefore what this means, and therefore what do I need to do? What do I need to do is helping this data, converting that data into information, to knowledge, to wisdom, and then actually becoming a wise person and taking appropriate decisions. And therefore, we cannot just stop in terms of data, but also have to have relevant metrics, analyze that, and look into some more actionable insights from that data. And therefore, like they say in terms of your depression cycle or whatever, you will start with denial. That no, this data is not important for me, it doesn't exist, I don't know where to get it from, so on and so forth. Eventually, you will have to be what I'm calling a data evangelist in terms of data-driven decision making. You will have to sort of force yourself. Many of us think that we are HR people, so we are more on the right side of brain and rather than the left side of brain, and this analytics and number crunching, etc., is not part of our life. In today's times, it cannot be, you cannot afford to say all this. And therefore, from this data denial stage to being a data evangelist, you'll have to take care of that. This is the standard kind of thing from moving from, defining the objective. Like I said, again, I'm giving you a consulting kind of thing, that when we go and with a client and ask for data, internally, we prepare what is called an analysis plan. Which means if somebody says, why do you need this data? Or even if somebody doesn't ask us that, we need to be very clear, why do we need this data? So if we actually get that data, what are we going to do with that data? And how is it going to come, and one way or the other, directly and indirectly, come into our recommendations from a consulting perspective. Similarly, as HR people, when you are looking for data, you need to be very clear, why are you looking for that data? What are you going to do with that data? And how will it impact your own decision making from an organization's perspective? That is the journey that you need to do. So clearly, 4 steps. One critical thing that we often forget is what is the data what is that not telling us? We always talk of strategy in terms of what I need to do, but strategy is also what not to do. And therefore, we need to be very mindful that is this data correct? Am I analyzing it correct? Or am I missing something that what it is not telling? That is the most critical step, because that will lead us to more insights in terms of what are we doing. And then, few on the lighter side, that, there are large number of analysis that we can do. Sometimes that leads to analysis paralysis, and so many graphs, some of them are not relevant kind of thing. This is the classic analysis paralysis that we are doing so much of analysis that by the time we come to meaningful insights, everybody's on a wheelchair and you have retired and gone to an old age home. Okay. Critical thing about data, when you're asking for data, what kind of data and what is the objective we need to have, is use this framework, what I call VED, which is vital, essential, and desirable. What is the absolutely critical, vital information that I need, without which I cannot take that relevant business decision? Then, of course, the essential part, and then the desirable part, which is basically the cherry on top. But focus in terms of the most important data that you have. We have all kinds of data. But the question is, I always say, sorry to use this word, have data will vomit. Yeah, because there's so much data coming in. And therefore, this is very, very critical that we have that in mind. Insights to actionable items. That is the journey we need to take. We've talked about it. This is the data massaging part, or I'm used a slightly stronger word in terms of torturing that data. So you need to be very clear that you are using data and data analysis to see what is coming out. Not saying that this is a decision, like the cartoon said, this is a decision I have taken, now let me find data that will hopefully, or if not, I will torture that data so that it supports that data. That should not happen. You have to move the logical way. This is where the gut feel part comes in. When you are left with too much choices, then you have to finally go that I want that basic vanilla or chocolate or whatever is your normal flavor. Okay, very quickly, 5 more minutes. Yeah, okay, very quickly on the analytics side. Let us remember that data is a tool, it is not a solution. Data doesn't do anything, we do. We create meaning from that data. And therefore, using that analysis, data-driven decision making for your HR analytics, it is our job and it is not something that will come out. You might have models today, of course, everybody, I'm not going to talk of AI, but I'm sure somebody else will. But please use AI and please use this self-service kind of thing or automatic kind of analysis very, very carefully. Of course, today now, whenever you use AI, the last line is saying that this may not be correct. Please verify. God knows where to verify it from though. But don't use this as a friend. Use this as a starting point. Finally, your intelligence has to be better than the artificial intelligence that is coming out. And then, of course, like they say, like I mentioned earlier, how do you move from data to information to knowledge to wisdom? And most importantly, be a wise HR person and take the right kind of decisions. Otherwise, you'll be just in, getting into some kind of conspiracy theory. Then that's where the paranoia comes in terms of too much data that is coming us. And therefore, asking these critical questions, what, when, how, where, etc., are absolutely critical for all of us. And then you can ask these questions on various things that you do in terms of HR, whether it is talent management, workflows planning, employee engagement, performance management, I'm just rushing through, sorry, L&D, even basic HR data management, and then change management, which is of course the most abused word, and wherever it is required is the benchmarking, that how do I compare with some of my direct or indirect competitors, similar size companies, same industry, best in class, best in industry, so on and so forth. So the critical steps obviously is use the data to provide guidance, strengthen the case for your budget approval. That's where you have to use data analytics and for getting sanctions from the business to sort of this thing. Involve the business, because at the end of the day, as HR, let's not forget our role as a process owner here. Finally, business has to take that decision. We are here, whatever you want to call it, HRBP, supporting business, we are a support function. No, we are now more mature. We are an enabling function. Enabling what? Enabling business. And therefore, the earlier you involve business, the better it is, which will help us move from just a pure implementer to an actual true strategic partner. And then, of course, the business first decisions can also be taken. We have to reach a stage where a critical business decision is being taken, and if HR is not in the room, business should say, let's wait for HR to come in, without which we will not start this discussion. That has to be our endeavor. I had mentioned all this earlier, that we have to look at, when we are looking at HR analytics, what this is, what this means, therefore what we should do. Our endeavor always has to be actionable insights, not just insights for insight's sake, not just analytics for analytics sake. Okay. Yeah, I think I'll spend some time here. 2 minutes. There are different ways in which you look into the analytics from an HR perspective: descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and in a large way, very, very mature way, prescriptive. Prescriptive is something which is like a sort of a dangerous territory, because you're putting your neck on the line. But even if you reach at a predictive stage right now, that's good enough. Prescriptive, I would say, use it very, very selectively. Different companies have taken it to a different level. These are, of course, multinational companies, have used different kind of things in terms of employee satisfaction, in terms of, very interestingly, Eon has used it from a, if people are not using vacation, then how does it employ their absenteeism kind of thing, or in terms of, analytics for predictive attrition. And Indian companies also have done that very, very critically. And again, same things, this is of course very, very well documented. Like I said, all of us sit on a large number of data. We call it big data or small data, it doesn't matter. We sit on a large number of data. Overloading that information, over-analyzing that without any purpose and objective in mind is not what we should do. Look into the analytics very, very critically, that what do we want to use, how do we want to cut that data, and how we want to present that data. And obviously we can't ignore the audience for which we are doing it. Our audience always has to be business. Internally first is our team, but secondly and most importantly, it has to be the business. Yes, AI tools are there and large number of other tools are there, but good old Excel, I'm sure the best of Excel experts here is not using more than 5 or 6% of what Excel can do for you. I'm not saying don't use other important tools, but even if you're in a small organization, your organization can't invest in such tools, this is good enough for you. I'm sure your organization has invested in a legal Excel kind of version. Okay, I don't have time. I have a quick, do I have 2 minutes? No, okay. I actually wanted to show you a small video interview I had done with this gentleman who is using, HR, data-driven decision for HR analytics, maybe some other time. So, yeah, thank you. This is, like I said, in God we trust, rest all bring data.
Thank you.
Thank you.